Japan is different from the rest of the world in every aspect you can think of. The Japanese are a one-of-a-kind people who take pride in their culture, traditions, and technological advancement. The education system of the East Asian country is also unique and unlike the rest of the world. Schools are considered the place where young minds are shaped and prepared for the future. Therefore, the Japanese school system is extraordinarily strict. However, they don't pressurize the students with unnecessary burdens like the schools and colleges in Western countries. Some of the rules enforced in Japanese schools seem pretty absurd and unfathomable, but the locals tend to adhere to these rules. From extremely specific dress codes to compulsory classes, even during vacations, here are 20 Japanese school rules you didn't know existed. Number 1. Students can't fail a grade. Doubling or being held back one year is not very common in Japan. Students here tend to move up the education system regardless of what their grades are. They're only made to repeat a year in rare and extreme cases. And the Japanese system doesn't only emphasize the grades of a student, instead they also consider their behavior, attendance, participation in extracurricular activities and clubs. All these things tend to positively affect a child's learning. So even if they're weak in certain subjects, it's not a reason to hold them back. That's probably why Japanese students are much more attentive and enthusiastic about learning as compared to their fellows in Western countries. The report cards of Japanese kids look quite different from that of students in Europe or America. They don't have to repeat a grade because of academic shortcomings, and all the students in a class will make progress through the academic grades in accordance with their age. Number 2. No food from home. This may not be a rule for all school-going kids, but primary and junior students in Japan are strictly forbidden from bringing food from home. The schools tend to provide these kids with healthy, nutritious food during mealtimes. Their menu can have a wide variety of delicious items that are good for growing children, such as soup, fish, or a bowl of rice. However, the menu varies from school to school. Wastage of food is not tolerated in Japan, so in some schools, the students might have to suffer punishment if they fail to finish their entire meal. So unlike the Western countries where students go to the cafeteria to buy lunch or just bring food from home, the Japanese provide a nutrient-rich meal for the students so that no one misses lunch, even if they're from an underprivileged background. Japanese schools in this way ensure that no child goes home hungry, and that they also have enough energy to go through the remaining classes of the day. This rule is not applied to students in higher grades because of the bento culture, which has become a new norm. This includes high school students bringing colorful, stylized, and nutritious home-cooked lunchboxes to school. Number 3. Mandatory swimming lessons. Swimming lessons are considered a vital part of education in Japan. It's not a rule meant to make life difficult for students. In fact, almost all schools in Japan are equipped with their very own swimming pool. So all the children are taught how to swim starting in elementary school. For generations now, the school is where Japanese students learn to swim. Because swimming lessons are compulsory in Japanese public schools, almost all the citizens know how to swim. Students actually enjoy their time in the pool. But in recent years, the schools and their pools have fallen victim to disrepair. They're also struggling to meet the costs of maintenance, so maybe in the future, all kids might not have access to mandatory swimming lessons starting from kindergarten. Number 4. No cell phones in school. For most of the previous decade, mobile devices were strictly banned in principal and metropolitan junior high and high schools. The Japanese school system considered cell phones a distraction that would only keep the students from focusing on their education. However, in recent years, the Tokyo Board of Education decided to lift this ban and allow junior high and high school students to bring their electronic devices to school. Following this decision, it was up to each school's principal to decide whether they want to permit mobile devices in classrooms. The schools that lifted the ban drew up guidelines and informed students about their rules on smartphone use. It was reported that the Metropolitan Board started seeing the devices as a useful tool to confirm the safety of students in case of a disaster situation. This decision was prompted by the earthquake that hit the Osaka prefecture during the morning commuting hours of June 2018. Number 5. Very short skirts for female students. For school students in Japan, it is customary to wear a uniform. Unlike the public schools in Europe and America where kids wear their everyday clothes to school with some restrictions, the young girls in Japanese schools wear a particularly short skirt with a long bobby socks as part of their school uniform. This style with extremely short skirts has often been inappropriately represented in certain art forms and media. Television shows, anime, and comics make it seem like all female students are required to wear inappropriately short skirts to school, but that is not always the case. It might be a requirement of some schools, but it's not an obligatory clothing requirement by most schools. Fashion is an important factor that influences the dressing of Japanese school-going kids just like anywhere else. However, it is noticeable that Japanese students do not wear stockings when they wear a miniskirt. This is mainly because Japanese people think that it's embarrassing to show their legs in a skirt or shorts when they're older. So the Japanese youth wear a miniskirt without stockings because they think it's a kind of privilege during a time when they're young. This is also why they don't mind feeling cold in their uniform miniskirts, as it's a sort of privilege, especially for high school students. Number 6. Punctuality. The Japanese people pride themselves on being on time all the time. They never compromise on the matter of punctuality, whether it's at the workplace, educational institutes, or at home. That's why punctuality is a huge deal at Japanese schools. Unless there is a very specific and verified urgent situation that forces the student to be late, the schools do not tolerate latecomers and do not allow them entry into the school. However, students missing school for being late is a rare scenario, as the Japanese kids are all very punctual just like their elders. They're extremely time-conscious and almost always try to reach school on time. Some students even stay after school to participate in extracurricular activities and various clubs. The Japanese people as a whole respect time more than anything, and that's why being late is something completely out of the ordinary for them. Number 7. Japan doesn't have substitute teachers. Believe it or not, but in the Japanese school system, there is no concept of substitute teachers. In fact, no substitute teachers are allowed at school. In countries like America, in case of a teacher being late or not being able to make it to school to teach, the school tends to provide a substitute teacher for the time, but not in Japan. Here, if the regular subject teacher is for some reason unable to come to class, there won't be a stand-in teacher. Instead, the students are expected to still come to class, remain inside, and do their schoolwork on their own just like they would do on any regular day. Japanese students are expected to study without a teacher to guide them in case a teacher is absent. Now, leaving 30 or more teenagers unsupervised in a classroom in an American high school would definitely be no less than a nightmare. But Japanese schools leave the students on their own when a teacher calls in sick. The secondary schools in Japan particularly don't have any substitutes. Instead, the students are trusted to sit quietly and study independently for the duration of the class. Number 8. Students can't dye hair. Japanese school rules significantly emphasize the natural appearance of the students. Japanese high school girls are not allowed to dye their hair in various colors or wear their natural hair if it isn't straight and black. They're also prohibited from painting their nails or wearing jewelry. The schools believe all these things distract students from their studies. But in recent years, the school rule that requires all students to dye their hair black if they have hair that is naturally another color has been causing a stir. This is required in order to create a uniform appearance for the student body. In Japan, spring marks the beginning of the academic year, and during the 2021 school year, 7 public high schools in Tokyo still demanded that students with natural, non-black hair dye it black. This rule has been considered highly controversial, and for the 2022 school year, it was completely abolished. It no longer remains in effect at any municipal school, but that doesn't mean for several decades the students weren't forced to dye their hair black to appease the school authorities. In numerous schools, the two-block undercut style in which boys shave their hair short on the sides and grow it out on top was also previously banned. This rule has also been abolished. Number 9. Curly hair is also not allowed. The hair color being uniform hasn't been the only concern of Japanese schools. They also want to dictate the texture of the students' hair. This is probably why girls with a naturally curly hair are required to straighten their hair in order to fit into the school's dress code. If their hair seems permed or unruly, the students might be denied entry into the school. Kids with naturally curly hair or mixed-race children suffer a lot because of this rule. And in some cases, students are also prohibited from entering the school if their hair looks too neat. There have been several instances when African Japanese students were accused of getting a perm, despite the fact that it was their natural hair texture. Some students have also reported being forced by school administration to pin straighten their hair because their naturally straight hair did not look natural enough. Number 10. Romantic relationships are forbidden. The schools in Japan are very strict about keeping the educational institutions as professional as possible. Dating is therefore forbidden at all of the junior high schools in the country. In Japan, schools are solely supposed to be for learning, and most parents and teachers also believe that very few junior high students manage to date under the restrictions. In fact, parents, teachers, and even students agree that dating does not play a part in the lives of the majority of junior high students. This is one school rule that is wholeheartedly supported by parents at home too. According to teachers, the main focus for students should be their education. They also think that most students are too young to think about relationships. The schools with strict no romance rules place complete bans on students dating each other or anyone else. This also includes their time off campus. Although, like most other places in Japan too, there are students who break this rule and develop feelings for one another at no romance schools. They mostly find a way to date in secret. Schools also emphasize the no dating rule as it prevents older men and adults from dating young schoolgirls and victimizing them. So in a way, Japanese schools are just looking out for their students and protecting them from predators. Number 11. Students clean the classrooms. Japanese schools don't have janitors who clean up the classes and mop the hallways after school is over. Instead, in Japan, there is a tradition that students themselves clean their schools. For only 15 minutes at the end of the day, the students use brooms, vacuums, and cloths to clean the classrooms, bathrooms, and other school spaces. This tradition is actually based on the 17th century philosophy, which states that a clear mind comes from keeping clean and clear surroundings. It is also considered a way of showing gratitude to the people and to objects that aid the kids in learning and building a successful future. Some also say that if the students are responsible for their own mess, they are less likely to make it in the first place. They will therefore show respect for their surroundings and keep the school premises clean. The students are, however, not alone in doing this. The teachers join in and help them. They mop the floors, clap the erasers, and scrub the toilets clean. So you won't find Japanese children putting gum under their chairs or doodling on the desks because they know that they'll have to clean it up themselves. Number 12. White undergarments for female students. It's no secret that the school dress codes in Japan are extremely choosy and are meant to eliminate all distractions. One such mandatory requirement is that these students must wear plain white underwear to school. This regulation has been adopted by most Japanese schools for a long time now. When the Nagasaki Prefecture Board of Education conducted a study of public high schools and middle schools within the prefecture, they found that the wear white underwear when you come to class is a surprisingly common rule. They examined 238 schools in total, and 138 or 58% of those schools have white underwear listed as a mandatory part of the dress code. But the specific wording of this dress code has been modified over time from underwear must be white to underwear must not be visible. Schools also grant themselves the authority to look at students' undergarments and also force the children to let teachers, classmates, and other school staff know the color of the underwear that they're wearing to school. At some schools, certain teachers periodically pull the bra straps of female students through their collars to check the color, while the female teachers just inspect the girls when they're changing clothes for PE class. And several elementary schools don't even let the kids wear undergarments during PE. Number 13. Curfew at 10 p.m. Believe it or not, Japanese minors are not allowed to roam around the city and enjoy their time in public spaces during the late hours of the night. In fact, in several parts of Japan, it's illegal for school children to walk around in public spaces late at night, although it is rarely enforced as minors are mostly accompanied by their parents. School children or anyone under the age of 18 is prohibited from frequenting public spaces after 10 p.m. at night. The local government collaborates with several different stakeholders to ensure that the citizens adhere to this rule. For instance, movie theaters, arcade places, and other hangout spots frequented by teenagers will not grant them permission to enter after curfew time. In addition to that, people who are past school age are asked to produce their IDs if they want to get inside any such place. The goal of this curfew is to prevent juvenile crime and to protect the youth from victimization. However, the curfews may be for the children, but it's the adults who are held responsible and penalized if the rule is not respected. and children found going out late at night are likely to be subject to protective guidance by a police officer. Number 14. Kanchoing the teacher. Kancho is a fun children's game that is quite popular in Japan. However, people in the rest of the world might consider it bizarre and downright disrespectful. The game is pretty simple and is often played as a prank. It's quite the favorite among elementary and kindergarten students. In fact, all the foreigners who visit Japan or move to the country are given a fair warning about getting kanchoed. But how does it work and why is it so embarrassing? Well, the kids clasp their little hands together, extend their index fingers, and then aim them right at the unsuspecting teacher's or friend's butthole. The kids in Japan tend to kancho mainly for two reasons. Firstly, because they're kids, which means they're small, fast, and haven't developed a sense of empathy or shame. Secondly, the parents and teachers in Japan are significantly more lenient with the under 6 age groups. So up until elementary school, the teachers are actually at the mercy of the pack. However, that doesn't mean young Japanese students are ill-mannered. In fact, most of them are very well behaved. But kanchoing has become a sort of cult practice amongst them, so they have fun at pranking their elders and teachers. Number 15. Ponytails banned in Japanese schools. This is one of the unpopular rules, however students have no choice but to abide by it. Japanese schools don't allow female students to wear their hair up in ponytails as they believe that the exposed nape of the neck can inappropriately excite male students. Of all these strict and absurd school rules that are still being implemented in Japanese educational institutions, this one is considered the most distasteful as it sexualizes female students. According to a 2020 survey, almost 1 in 10 schools in Fukuoka prohibited ponytails for young girls. And in a report published by Vice, it was also revealed that Japanese schools also dictate the shape of the eyebrows, the color of the socks, underwear, and many other aspects of the uniform, especially for female students. The teachers have revealed that the students are never given any logical explanation about these restrictions. And strangely, the schools do not allow ponytails, but they do allow bob-cut hair, which also exposes the nape of the neck. Some schools did change this rule after students complained, but in most schools, ponytails and even pigtails are still prohibited, as they ignore the notices from the government that aren't legally binding or have any penalties. Number 16. Sasumata use for protection. Just like schools around the world, the schools in Japan also prepare for safety issues and intruders. In fact, they actually hold school intruder drills that are full contact and often quite unpredictable. Violent crime is pretty rare in Japan, and unlike America, everyone cannot buy guns here or bring them to schools. In comparison to the United States, violence directed at schools in Japan tends to overwhelmingly involve knives, due in part to Japan's strict firearms laws. The most infamous attack occurred in Ikeda, a suburb of Osaka, back in 2001, when 8 students lost their lives after a man with a history of mental illness attacked. In order to prevent such incidents and to contain any violent intruders, the school administration uses a particular tool called the Sasumata. It is an aluminium pole with 2 curved prongs originating at one end while the other end is used to hold it. It is adapted from an ancient samurai weapon and today it can be found hanging in schools all across the country. The idea is to use the tool to immobilize any trespasser by trapping their torso between the prongs. During intruder drills, a trainer shows up to the school dressed like a suspicious person on a designated day and tries to scare the students, after which teachers work in squads to immobilize the pretend intruder. They divide into seizure and relief teams. The seizure team uses Sasumata and other tools like chairs to keep the intruder from moving, while the relief team tries to disarm the threatening individual. Number 17. Respectful greetings. Respectful greetings are also an extremely important part of Japanese culture. Well, actually, these should be mandatory all around the world. That's why all students in Japan tend to enthusiastically greet one another as well as their teachers. It is actually mandatory for all the students to greet their teacher once they have formally entered the classroom. This is how they begin their lesson every single day. Some Japanese schools even start the day with a morning meditation session for both the students and the teachers. This allows the teacher and the pupils to begin their day with a positive energy and outlook that lasts for the entirety of the long school hours. In Japan, honoring the teacher with the correct phrases and polite manner is not optional. It's not surprising, owing to the fact that respecting elders is an extremely important part of Japanese culture, and from kindergarteners to old people, everyone greets each other with the utmost respect in this country. The most commonly used word to respectfully greet a teacher, boss, elder, or stranger in the morning is Ohayo gozaimasu, which means good morning. Number 18. School even in summer vacations. Summer vacations in Japanese schools are a huge disappointment for people around the world. The summer holidays in Japan are often labeled the summer bummer. That doesn't mean students don't get any time off, however, it's not as long as the vacations around the globe are. Students in Japan get a 5-week-long summer vacation, which is just half as long as America's. However, calling it a break or a vacation might be an exaggeration, because unlike in America, the summer break in Japan falls right in the middle of the school year. The school might be off technically, but the teachers and students still typically come to school almost every single day for club activities. Even elementary school students who don't have these activities are assigned an excessive amount of summer homework, so they can't enjoy the holidays in the true sense either. Homework either consists of a workbook on several subjects or tens of handouts made by the teachers. The students are supposed to do it little by little every day to finish it by the end of the summer holidays. However, when the summer break gets closer, the school hours begin to gradually shorten, so instead of the normal 6 periods, the schools only have 3 or 4 periods a day closer to the holidays. Number 19. Few dress accessories are not prohibited. Public elementary schools and junior high schools prohibit students from wearing certain accessories. They are strictly banned from wearing a muffler around their neck, even if they have a weak throat or are feeling cold. However, instead of a muffler, a towel is allowed. Similarly, schools in Japan also don't allow students to wear a non-white face mask on school premises. Colorful masks are forbidden, so all students had to buy a white face mask during the pandemic. And middle school students in Japan are not allowed to wear jewelry items like earrings, bracelets, or necklaces because all these things are considered fashion accessories. The female students are also required not to have manicured hands with colorful nails. Since the uniform is mandatory in all schools, most kids are expected to strictly adhere to the uniform guidelines and not wear any fashion accessories. They are also not allowed to wear colorful socks or shoes. In fact, all Japanese students are expected to change out of their outside shoes and into their inside shoes when they enter the school. By having different shoes indoors and outdoors, the kids avoid bringing in dirt from outside. Number 20. Saturday school. Going to school 5 days a week for many is already too much, especially if you consider all the homework students get and the tests. But imagine the misery of Japanese students who have to go to school even on Saturdays. While most schools around the world hold Saturday classes in rare instances or as a punishment, in Japan going to school on a Saturday has been a norm for decades. Until recently, every single Saturday in Japan it used to be a school day. One-day weekends were actually the tradition for Japanese schools until 1992. This was when the government began phasing out these Saturday lessons as they were pushing nationally for a more relaxed education system. But that didn't mean all schools adopted this new reform. In fact, many school boards downright ignored the change and continued holding extra lessons on Saturdays. Even today, almost half of Tokyo elementary and junior high students still have to spend at least one Saturday morning every month studying math or science instead of watching cartoons or sleeping late. And the schools remaining closed for a long time due to the coronavirus outbreak only gave authorities more reason to shorten the summer holidays and hold Saturday classes after the pandemic ended in order to help the students catch up.